All right, so this is a recap and reflections from our last night's Dark Age of Man campaign session number 6. The second session that I play as presenter. We are rotating presenters in this. David's done 2, Sam's done 2, and I did the first one to launch us, and I've done this last night's session. So we started this kind of as a tutorial series of games. We talk openly about about how to use the system. And the system is designed to be utterly flexible. And the reason for that is the presenter role should not know anything, should be completely naive outside of what we begin with. And you begin with one page as a presenter of information. What's the scenario in which they find themselves, time of year, date, and what's happening right now in the world that's kind of important or relevant, or not important, could be mundane depending on the nature of the world. And then we have some things that we know that are key points that are somewhat hidden from the players. An inciting incident, which generally shows its head in Show Don't Tell. A major and a minor dilemma, which exists behind the curtain that is affecting the world or affecting a key player or NPC. And these things, when remedied, can earn the group a repute each if they somehow remedy a major or minor dilemma. Whether they do it wittingly or unwittingly does not matter. And then we have what we call a random seed generator. Mine are usually one word. So now in the book, we used phrases, and they aren't necessarily meant to be cogent. They're not necessarily meant to be theme-based, but they could be. You could make a theme-based game. But mine are generally one word, and they're one word because, again, I'm supposed to be naive. And as the players engage the session, describing their character, their actions, the narrative, I make rolls randomly. And of course, the more vague this is, the more I can put it into context. It could be literal, it could be figurative, it could be now, it could be in a few minutes, it could come up later. And again, I can roll as many of these as I feel the session needs to keep things interesting for the players. And ultimately, these end up affecting play and becoming very often the dilemmas or the immediate threats the players must contend with. So last night, my goal was to do less system speak. However, there were periods where I did I just pointed out, I'm going to ask you to do this, or I'm doing it for this reason, etc. So outside of that, it is very much straight up how we would play. There's sessions that we've done in the past where we play and we don't talk about system at all. And we'll just call for a roll, right? And everybody knows what we're doing. So there are some really interesting, and here's the thing, every session is going to be, if it's engaged from the player's directed view, right? As the presenter kind of sets up the scenario before session starts, which is what this is. And then I say to Bill, where are you at, Bill? What are you doing? Bill's going to place himself, he's going to describe her and place himself in that, not directly in that, but place himself in the world doing something, and he can pursue his own ends. And then, of course, he might run into one of these random seeds. He might engage directly an NPC that leads to conversations, that leads to the inciting incident, or leads to, okay. But what's really interesting about this is how every GM is going to be different about this, right? Of course, every GM is, but for instance, I rolled Vampire, which is an epic, really a pretty much a game changer. It's a dangerous thing. Now, Vampire, again, could have just been they discovered evidence of a vampire. It could have been that they heard rumors of a vampire. Could have been that they actually meet a vampire in the court of the king. It could mean that they encounter directly a vampire. And again, our vampire is whatever you want to describe. Our book describes creatures and gives some data, but we leave the description, again, open to your version of a vampire. We do not dictate to you what a vampire is. So in this scenario, the random seed directly affected Dell and Sam as the previous seed, which was something simple. However, Dell's interaction with that particular that particular discovery, as it was called on the chart, and him taking the blade. When I then rolled vampire for the next seed, I just, again, contextually tied the vampire to Dell's actions. But I could have had them just discover evidence of a vampire. I could have had them actually meet a vampire or be assaulted by the vampire. Or it just happened to be narratively, again, because I don't know when I roll the chart, what does this mean? It just made sense that they came across this discovery of bones, human bones scattered about, and an altar, a makeshift altar with an old blade on it. And I said, well, that makes sense. This belongs to somebody. And the vampire's, going to find his blade. So that ended up ultimately being what Dell and Sam contended with the whole session. On the flip side, Faustus started at home, and I tied our actual setup, it's called, directly to what's happening in the, again, very often your setup's going to involve Dredgewater. It's going to involve Dredge County. It's going to involve the Washburns, the Lord, or it might involve London. It might involve the overall country, right? But our settings generally involve the location that your characters are ultimately residing in and functioning in, which is Dredge County, Dredgewater, the city of Dredgewater, the surrounding area. However, you don't have to have a character from Dredgewater. You could play in London or whatever you want to do. But the book just gives you the surrounding area and NPCs, things like that. And then you make Dredgewater your own, whether that's a serious thing or it's kind of a lark or whatever you want to do. You make Dredgewater your version of Dredgewater. One of our goals in the book is to let people make the monsters theirs, the world theirs, whatever. We give you enough that you can just play. But all right. So the gist is this particular setup directly called on Faustus. It was young Wesweld who's been put in charge of managing his father's property, as his father is ill, and we don't know if he's dying, but he's ill. He's unable to do his job as lord of his country. So his young son, the heir apparent, the heir presumptive heir apparent, must step in and do the job. So the young 18-year-old Wesweld has been for the last few weeks in the setup doing lordly duties, and he calls upon his tutor, to come, as there's the king, a king from the north has sent an emissary with a proposal of marriage to his daughter, and is putting pressure on Wesweld. They don't know, and I don't even know. Again, it's a simple sentence. Just for those who want to know, again, the players don't know this, but I'm going to go ahead and read it here. Inciting incident. Osbert's emissary, Gorth Yasildan, is in Dredgetown. That's it. That is the inciting incident. Again, I'm trying to keep it where I'm naive because it's about the players and what the players are after, what the players are doing. What does this mean? Is he there, to force the young Wesweld to marry? Right? We don't know. We won't know until we play. We won't know until Faustus, in his conversation with Wesweld, draws out something or fails a roll that might dictate whether this emissary is indeed a problem, or if this emissary is innocent and Wesweld is just conflicted, right? We don't know. I don't go in knowing what Wesweld wants. And this is the thing, it's so difficult to express to GMs who traditionally know. They traditionally set something up. They traditionally say, okay, my NPC, this is who my NPC is, and they're not going to get away. And that's okay. You could actually have a setting where it says that the King of London wants war with Ireland. And well, you're not going to persuade the King of England, right? You've set it in stone. This king NPC wants war. You can attempt to overthrow your king, or you can attempt to negotiate and win and change his mind. But you can have an NPC with obviously a direction. But very often here, Wesweld's an 18-year-old NPC, and he has been the pupil, right, of Faustus, right? And so Faustus is in a completely different area. We start at the same time, but it's not necessarily the same day. So Faustus literally starts at the end of his day, where he finally, at day's end, reads a missive that the children brought for the children come every day to get their education. And of course, Wesweld's not been coming because he is Lord of the Manor. And so he has not been coming, but the second boy and the two young girls, they come every day with armed guards, and he teaches now at his own tower, as he's been gifted land from his role in the war they won. So Faustus has his own old Roman ruin and old watchtower property that he resides on, and they come to him now, and he teaches them, and so it again, we start with this missive he gets from Weswell asking him to come and stay a few days and meet the emissary, right? Faustus would not know why the emissary is there yet, right? As they would have heard rumors maybe that the Northwich king wants a marriage between Weswell and his daughter. Okay. So anyway, so at the end of the day, he reads this missive. He tells his house servant that he'll be leaving for a while in the morning and pack and get everything ready to go. So Faustus literally starts in a different place, but he also starts at a different time, and it doesn't make any difference, right? Again, we talk about this is narrative, so we can micro, macro, we can go into micro time, macro time, we can fast forward, we can move it. You got to think about it like a movie. The Star Wars are great examples of the screen swipe. Meanwhile, while this is happening in Faustus's day, we transition over to Saverick, and we ask Saverick, where are you at? What are you doing? And he tells his tale of why he's out in the woods. And he's a warden. He's already a warden doing his job for the king. But he describes how he's become a celebrity from slaying he's got a nickname now. He was the Dane Slayer. And he brought down Redbeard and he won the war single-handedly, kind of thing, right? In a one-on-one battle in front of the armies. And so he's now a celebrity, and he's he doesn't want to be part of civilization. He doesn't want to be harassed. Meanwhile, people are always out looking, but they want to see Saverick. They want to talk to Saverick. So he tells a tale how he's constantly now nomadic. He's moving all the time, and he's exhausted because he can't seem to find peace. He sets this up, and this is all true, right? This is his frame of mind. This is why he's in the woods. This is why he's where he's at. And then we ask Sam, where are you? Well, Ursa, who happened to be, so Sam he created a seer, a blood seer, a blood magic seer with his NPC Viking Lord in the sessions that he was running. And she was the one giving him advice. And so Sam decided to make that his character for the campaign, as he had another young warden, but I think he decided there was no real game there for him there. In a way, we didn't need it. I think Saverick was kind of a warden, and I don't know, but Sam abandoned his first character and decided to create this female witch, I don't know, witch, seer. And he describes his, again, motives. Where am I at? What am I doing? Well, I've been obsessed with Saverick since I watched him kill my Viking king, my Viking, master. So she now decides it's her fate to be in his hands. Her name is means she bear, and he's wielding the bear claw or something, which is an old Viking sword, which Saverick is unaware of any of this, right? Saverick just got they found the sword. Willem gave the sword to him, and Saverick's oblivious to I think in many ways to the value of the sword. He hasn't studied the blade. He doesn't care about the runes. It's fascinating. Saverick is just a utilitarian type of guy, right? It's like, hey, this is a nice weapon. It's okay, cool. I'll use it. And there's other things that are on Saverick's mind, right? It is a tool. It means nothing more to him than that, right? At least that's what I get from Dell's characterization. Meanwhile, Ursa seen him wield the sword and then saw him kill, the Sea King with it. And Ursa, he decides he wants to play a character, this Ursa, and she is obsessed with finding Saverick because she feels now she is connected to Saverick, that she's supposed to be somehow with him now, right? Okay. So very cool setup. And so she describes how she's been for weeks trying to find him, and she's finally found him, and she's been basically stalking him. But Saverick's a man of the world, and he's aware just on the periphery of his consciousness that something's out there. But anyway, we have the encounter, and Sam allows Saverick turns, and she's kind of dressed herself up with a helm with antlers, etc., and tries to look somewhat like a deer that's out in the woods. So Saverick draws his bow, fires upon her, and purposely misses her, but has the goal with the shot to pin her to the tree she's kind of hiding behind. And he rolls a 12 nat. He rolls an actual critical success, and he's literally pins her garments to the tree, and then he approaches, and they have a parlay. Now, I did not roll the first seed until every character situation was decided. And then I rolled the first seed. And then from the first seed, I said, okay, where does this best fit? Where Faustus is currently at home in his tower, or where another character in the world's at? Well, I rolled discovery, and discovery could be anything. They could just discover information. They could discover a treasure. They could discover a hidden bandit hideout. It doesn't make any difference. So again, discovery. I'm free, not knowing to think, what is this as we're on the fly? So while they're role playing, I'm thinking, where am I going to introduce this? What am I going to introduce? So as they play, I then slowly point out that they're kicking bones around at their feet because they're so engaged. He's not taking his eyes off her. He's got an arrow trained on her. He's asking her intense questions. She's responding with her veiled, blood magic taunts, and she actually has a vision. She draws blood and has a vision, and the vision. Then I rolled the table, and I replaced one of the variables on my table with Sam's vision because he sees the future. She sees the future. So if she saw the future, that he would be, ultimately he would have someone from his past try to kill him. I think was I can't remember exactly how he worded it, but anyway, that went. So I scratched it. I rolled randomly, and whatever came up, I scratched that out, and I wrote in a new truth, and the new truth was his vision. Okay, then while they're playing, I describe as there's a moment where Dell describes he looks about, thinking there's somebody else in the woods, and she's with them and she's calling them out. As he glances away, he sees something. And then I introduce the discovery, which he doesn't know yet what it is. He hasn't investigated, but he sees a glimpse of something. And then as part of that discovery, they realize at their feet, they're kicking rib cages around and skulls around and bones, and they realize they're in a killing field. He investigates in the woods. She says, trust me, I'm not here with anybody. There is no one else out there. He doesn't believe it. He goes and investigates, and he finds an old Roman capital that somebody has brought into the woods and set up as an altar. And there's an old blade on the top of it that's even has moss. It's been there long enough, and moss has kind of grown to it on this old Roman capital that has just been moved out and placed at about 4 foot high, 3 foot high, 4 foot high altar. And that's it. But there's bones scattered about, and that's their discovery. They can make of it what they want. They can investigate more. It can become the whole session, or it can be tied to something they believe, and they pursue it to their own ends, right? Or I can roll another variable that I could tie to this, depending on how important it is to the players. Well, they investigate. They decide they need to move on, and he takes the blade from the altar. Meanwhile, we go to Faustus, and Faustus, in the next morning, after telling his ignorant peasant 15-year-old boy, Elgin, take care of the house, take care of the animals, stay here, do your job. Do you understand? And I explained to him that you've rescued the boy from just being a lost orphan peasant, and you've given him some responsibilities, but he's somewhat of a scatterbrain, maybe borderline idiot, right? So he finally convinces the boy, and he makes sure the boy understands everything. He leaves him and he heads out, but he knows that the routine is every morning the guards bring the kids up the road and deliver them for the day's classes, the tutorials. And the reality is he figures he'll meet him on the road, so he heads off, and he does. He actually runs into him, and Joy approaches him and hugs, or doesn't touch him, but approaches him and smiles and points, and they talk. And I had rolled witch was my next roll, and so I decided I would put a witch here, and I knew what the normal routine was, so I made the witch there, and this was ultimately an illusion. She was using a mind trick upon Faustus. She slowly presents herself, and as he approaches her and gets within touching a distance in which she could touch him, the illusion ends, and she does indeed stick her hand on his chest. He fails a resistance, kind of a spirit check. And again, he doesn't want to deal with spirit. He wants to deal with mind. Well, she's using magic. So he's caught right now. Now he can use mind, as he later describes when he says, "I am a man of, I'm a man. I don't believe in these things. I'm a man of science." Therefore, right, he could have demanded, he wanted spirit to be his counter to this, which we could have done. It wasn't thinking that way. Again, it's flexible. The system's completely flexible for the player to even say. So what I did, though, when he described his character's attitude about magic, I reduced her difficulty value. So the witch is a 10 difficulty value. Well, when he described that he doesn't buy into this stuff, he's not a believer, I lowered the difficulty to an 8, believe it or not, right? Then he still felt the role. So he ends up basically, for the lack of a better term, is charmed. And she's in his head, speaking to him through, she touches him, but she speaks to him telepathically. And she tells him and commands him to take her to Dredgetown. And that's all that he knows. For now, he attempts to resist, fails. He ultimately accepts his fate, and they head together toward Dredgetown. And he is compelled to do so, right? It's not so much an order now. He just feels compelled to take her to Dredgetown. He knows it. He's consciously aware that, like being in a dream, you're aware that you're dreaming, but you can't really, you can do something about it, I suppose. I'm the kind of person that if I suddenly am aware I'm dreaming, I wake up. But he can't wake up, right? He can't. So, but as they go down the road, he is still aware of his surroundings. And he spies what looks like there's been a scuffle. And then as he starts to pass through this area where there had been a fight or a scuffle, he sees evidence of blood and where bodies were pulled. And as he looks to the side of the road, he actually sees 2 dead soldiers. And he now knows, oh, this is where she got the illusion of these kids and the soldiers. She encountered them in the morning before me. So that's where she knew who these people were and what they looked like. Well, he doesn't see the children anywhere, but he loses he gets angry how, these poor kids, and he attempts again to resist her and fails. So he turns on her, but he's instantly arrested and angry and aware of what's going on, but he can't stop himself from taking her. So he has to return to taking her to Dredgetown, and she confirms to him, "Yeah, I know you." And she basically taunts him that they're all gone. So he now thinks the children are also dead, right? But we don't know. I don't even know, right? I've only made up my mind that we can eliminate 2 guards and give evidence of how she achieved this trick, right? This illusion by using this party of people. I was not going to just willy-nilly murder 3 children that are paramount characters. They could be found dead, right? Again, it's up to the GM. He could have saw evidence of the boy dead, right? Those are world-changing events. The Witch was just number 13 on the chart, so that's not what I'd call a world-changing event. If The Witch had been 17, I might have had Connor or one of the girls also dead, right? Because it would have been a world-changing event. It would have affected the family, so to speak. Okay. But again, this is the great thing about being presenter. I don't have a plan. I don't know. I go with kind of what makes sense based on the weight of the chart. For instance, Conrad, on my chart, I have Connor, one of the children of Washburn. He's a 5. So that means when I roll, so where I put it on the chart tells me, okay, Connor's just the second boy in the family, but it's at 5 on the chart, which tells me it's a pretty important thing involving Connor. So not just is it one word, where I place it is paramount in whether it's serious with Connor or it's a lark with Connor. So if Connor's at number 10, that means it's a lark. Connor maybe has been lost, he's lost in the woods, or Connor is asking for help, whatever, it just comes to me. But if I put Connor at 3, that's epic. That is world changing. What would that mean? Is Connor possessed by a demon and is now a threat to the household and we've going to have an exorcism, right? That kind of thing. Who knows, right? So where I put Connor on this list decides also how weighted the situation is. Okay. So anyway, Faustus, we cut back to them, and I have them make a luck roll because I've rolled vampire now, and in my head I've decided the vampire is going to be somewhat traditional, only in that he can be out at night, so to speak, right? But it's going to be wholly my version of a vampire in our world. So I have them make a luck check, both of them, and to determine whether it's night or not. We had not declared what time of day it is. So they both succeed their luck check, and I describe that time has gotten away from them, and they're only 20 minutes or so from sunset. So, and I have to do this because I have to introduce the vampire. So I have to find a way to introduce what time of day it is here, right? So again, I didn't start with time of day. I want to be vague. I want to leave it up to the players. If Saverick had narrated at the beginning of his moment, the beginning of the session, it's nighttime and I'm stalking through the woods and I'm moving at night because I'm tired of dealing with people. And during the day, I keep bumping into people trying to get, so I'm moving through night. He would have dictated the space. The vampire would have been there, no sweat. But because of this tension and because of this long morning, they make a luck check to see exactly what time it is, and they succeeded. But because I need to introduce the vampire, I tell them, you guys realize, it's been a longer day than you realize. The sun is falling, and in about 15 or 20 minutes, you're going to be in the dark. So Saverick says, and again, this is what's beautiful about it. Saverick looks about the bones and the altar and says, I don't want to be here when the sun goes down. He said, let's go. So he grabs the girl. They hike off 20 minutes away, up and over a hill. They set camp, and then night falls. And I explain that in the distance where they had come from, they hear this primordial, unearthly scream. And they both are made aware instantly as they were, and again, another great role play as she's in a way interrogating him or taunting him. In a way, I see it as taunts. And Saverick's trying to interrogate her. He's fiddling with this blade, which has no hilt. It's just the blade. And he's looking at it, but he's really preoccupied with her. So he's not yet said, I'm investigating the blade. Okay. Meanwhile, they both make a check to see if they recognize what this primordial scream was, this supernatural, this unearthly scream was. She actually has a glimmer, and she recognizes that it could be a creature from folklore in her northern country, but she's not aware of what myth might be here in England. She's from, of course, the north, right? She's a Viking, or she's a north. We call them sea peoples in our game. Okay, so so she just knows that there is a legend connected to such a thing, but she doesn't really know what the hell it could be here. I then describe within just a few moments, it screams again, and it's half the distance. So it is literally moving. In the 20 minutes it took them to get here to set camp, it is within moments half the distance. And they're now, just then, Saverick realizes they're in a danger, and he pushes her to the ground and stands over her with this blade in hand, thinking what to do. And I present the creature. It comes in and it's there, and I describe the creature. Because he said that he ducked down and pushed her down, I put the creature there unawares. But he was right there in their camp. Saverick had kicked out the fire, but it got there so quickly, it's smelling the air, or it's at least investigating the area, and Saverick attacks it, and he fails. And so he takes damage, and we have this narrative combat. As he describes how he attacks it, if he fails, I describe using that how he is wounded. So it grabbed his hand, jerked him off the ground, and dislocated his shoulder, takes a wound. And not dislocated, but wrenches his shoulder. He describes how he wants to, then the creature actually pulls him to his face. I describe the creature, and the creature asks for his blade, and that should acute them that, oh, it's here because, and he goes, oh, what blade? This blade? The blade he had in his hand, and he stuck him in the ribs with the other blade because he drew his dagger to attack, and he had the other blade, which has no hilt, so so he drives it into but he failed the roll, and she stood up and was telling Saverick what to do. So she mentioned the blade. So when he had a critical failure on that roll, again, in our narrative combat, if everybody's engaged, anyone can suffer the wound. It's narrative. So because she mentioned the blade, she was referring to the sword on Saverick's back. Saverick, of course, was handed the blade that the monster wanted, the demon wanted, vampire. And so he describes how he drives it into its ribs, but he rolled a critical fail, which would have been epic wounds to his character. But because she was barking, use the blade, I turned that wrath on her and smacked her off into the woods with one shot, doing 2 damage to her. So she went from battered to fatigued in one strike, and she's now laying in the woods, a knocked bandy, and he accepts a wound. So I actually did allow Saverick to damage him, took a wound, but I used the critical to smack her away. Okay, so again, combat in our game is completely flexible. Depending on how we're narrating the scene, it makes sense who gets damaged or how they get damaged, etc. You can, I didn't have to accept a wound. I described how it went into his ribs. Well, this creature, it might not have been really phase him, right? Because he's basically undead. However, I just went ahead and took a hit point off of him. So our creatures in our game have health points for a very good reason, but our characters have wounds. Wounds are narrative. We can really play with those. I need health points because we need to represent the epic. We need to represent how difficult it is to bring a dragon down based on how many players may be engaged in trying to defeat a dragon and how they're going to have to work to bring a dragon down, right? So we use health points for creatures as it becomes they represent a different form of game mechanic, so to speak, when it comes to combat. Every character in the game has the same mortality rate, right? The same as they are all humans, they all have the same. So we don't use the concept of hit points. There are wounds. And again, we can narrate those things any number of ways, right? Okay, and remember, the players are very often in control of the narrative. If Dale wanted to say, I try to run for it, then we're going to make a roll. And the roll, whether he succeeds or fails, can determine whether he gets away, etc. So they are very much in control of whether they want to continue to engage a creature like this or how they want to deal with it. Dale could have said, you mean this blade, and thrown it into the woods, right? And failed the roll, and he would have just thrown him away, causing 2 wounds, but it would have bought him a moment as the creature went for his blade for whatever reason. And we don't have to logically know why the creature cares about the blade. There's some backstory there. This is what I mean. Don't know. You don't have to know. I don't have to know why there's an altar there. It's a mystery, and they don't have to know it's a mystery for them. Well, it's okay as presenter in our game for it to be a mystery to me. We want the presenter to be, in a way, a player. And I don't know why this creature cares about the blade, but because I decided that his taking the blade tied the vampire directly to this scene, it becomes the motivation for this creature. I don't give a shit why. I just don't care what the lore is. I don't have to make complete logical sense. I only have to make contextual sense, right? Okay. So they end up in this epic melee, and we cut back to Faustus. Faustus is coming into town, and I have him make a luck check as there are people about. There's soldiers, there's people, and she clutches. I describe how she clutches him close, gripping his robes in her hand, and he can feel her grip the robes and tug him in like they're together, as clearly indicating she is vulnerable. Then I have him make a luck check. He nails the luck check, and the luck check is to describe whether anyone notices or if anyone approaches him, or if the children arrive. So he nailed a 10, and I described how the children who had run away when she waylaid the guards, and Connor attempted to help. He got battered and bruised, and I'm coming up with where they're coming from. He had taken his sisters and run away into the woods, escaping, and they are obviously going to head home, and maybe they've even been tracking what she's doing with Faustus. It doesn't matter. But when they get into civilization, the kids come running, screaming witch, pointing her out. She's surrounded, and Faustus is still under the spell. And we have this parlay in the street where Faustus attempts to approach her and deal with her. And I rolled witch again. So just as Faustus breaks the spell, once we rectify a seed, I generally roll another seed. Faustus broke the spell. So I'm like, okay, so now I'm going to roll something for what might come next. And guess what I rolled? Witch. Now, normally you could scratch it off and the witch is gone, and you could just roll again. Or you could say, I could have multiple seeds and say, what's number 13-2? What's 13-3? But I don't want to go into a session with 3 charts. I literally don't. We played 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I only need 1 chart. But what I do is I use it again if it's not resolved. This isn't resolved. They just took the witch into custody. When he approached the witch, I had rolled witch again, and then she's back up to a level 10 DV because it's been reset. So the witch is now back up to 10. She's not been reduced by the narrative. He narrated how he didn't believe in magic. That reduced her difficulty. He then used the kids as a motivation to break the spell. He got angry and he saw the kids, and he fought to break the spell. lowered her DV. She was at 6. She was captured, but then I rolled 10. Faustus literally went over to her to express his hatred and to grab something of hers, and I had rolled 10. So she was literally back up to a 10 DV, and this could have been epic Dredgewater downtown melee or witch explosion, so to speak. It didn't go that way. As the narrative naturally, they drag her away. She's a DV10, but she's just a little tiny woman. Her powers come from other means, and they drag her away. We don't know, right? Meanwhile, I said, okay, that's the second time we've kind of resolved the witch, but she's not dead. She's not removed from the fiction. I rolled a new seed. I rolled witch again. So I rolled witch 3 times during Faustus's turns. And I had to tell them because I normally I would never have said, oh my God, guys, I rolled witch again. But so in other words, this witch is becoming a pretty much a paramount NPC. She's becoming an evil villain, not just a thing in the map. She is just persistent. So the witch is still in play. So what this tells me is what's in play, what's not in play. So the witch is definitely in play. Okay. We go back to Saverick and the witch in the fight, and they're now fully engaged. The witch is opened a crevice in the world and has commanded the hell to suck him in. He suffers damage and he's trapped. He's kind of stuck in this. His feet are stuck in this thing. Meanwhile, Saverick, on another failed roll, gets thrown into the trees and is now dying. He has been suffered enough wounds. He's literally dying, meaning that any next condition, he is dead. And he describes how it's he suffered an injury when I flicked him into the woods, and which was a legitimate injury, dislocation of his arm. He describes with his left hand how he manages to draw the blade. Anyway, he while in the dying state comes upon. Oh yeah, right. Then the creature, once he got, because he jabbed him, so the creature felt the blade and let out a primordial scream that ruptured the eardrums of Saverick, creating the dying condition. She managed to avoid damage. She of course succeeded her combat check, and she succeeded her combat check with a critical success. Saverick, because he failed that combat check, suffered his eardrums exploded, and he's literally waylaid. He's laying in the with a dislocated arm, and he is in the dying condition at this point. So he was flung into the trees, suffered an injury, his ears ruptured, he's now dying. And she avoided it, and because she had a critical success, she created a spell where the earth freezes and cracks open and begins to pull him into hell. So his feet are now kind of stuck in this thing, and she's created this environment. Meanwhile, Saverick tries in his dying condition to draw the weapon, the sword, with his left hand, and he attempts while the creature now is engaged with her as he has driven his long fingernails into her, and he's picked her off the ground, and as she is being waylaid. He attempts to take advantage of this and to charge in and cut its head off. He has a critical failure, and I describe how it definitely just flicks her off its fingers, and it's so fast it turns and catches him in stride, taking his hand and actually pulling his blade from behind his head through his neck, decapitating him instantly, and then flings his headless body off into the bushes and examines the blade as she then rises and further commands the magic of ravens as they assault it. And as it's slowly sinking into the ground, being succumbed, and ravens are attacking it, it lashes out in its death blows one final time, causing her yet one final wound. And then it succumbed to the spell. The earth sucks it and swallows it whole. And she stands there now dying. She's in the dying condition. I mean, this ended literally. Uh, uh, it was sheer luck that she didn't, of course, die. She stands dying condition. She takes the sword and she secures Saverick's head to her waist. And he describes how she's going to pray as she stumbles off into the darkness, pray for help, pray for refuge, pray for somebody. She makes the roll, and indeed, I describe how she stumbles out of the woods into a small cabin. She can see the candle lights flickering through the shutters. She can see smoke from its chimney, and she passes out, giving out a soft cry and whimper as she passes out. She is unconscious. We fade to black on that portion of the session. We go over to Faustus to wrap up the session. And I describe how he has delivered the children to Lady Washburn and she's taking them as we have a great role play where he sees the kids and he embraces the children. He is angry at the witch. He's angry at himself. He feels somewhat responsible that the kids would be in this situation. And he, which is what's so great about this. This was David's idea. I want the kids now to come to me. I have my own land. I have a tower. I want them to come to me so I can tutor these children outside the purview of the Washburns. You know, I have a freer hand in how I educate these children without people watching over me. David created this potential dilemma himself. It's legit. It's legit motives. It's legit reasoning because David may want to teach these kids certain things, right? And he doesn't want to deal with mommy and daddy watching or mommy and daddy servants, whatever. Who knows? But he did compromise the children by changing how he tutors them. And when I make a roll on this chart, the children become a tool, a device, a narrative device that I can use to motivate Faustus. And this is what makes it all about the players. This is also how I can say, Dale, wow, dude, the vampire, it cost me my character's life. Wow. Well, you took the blade, right? And you didn't narrate that you wanted him to escape. You narrated that you hunkered down and waited for it. When I described it was literally moving so fast. So there's all kinds of ways a player can narrate a different situation. He could have narrated, it was a critical failure, tough to narrate a sundering, but Dale could have said, right? Dale could have said when he rolled it, in his critical failure that that it breaks my left arm, you know, and I allow it though to, or it shatters the sword. So the critical failure is he could have sundered the sword. Dale could have said, I rolled a critical failure, and in its response, it destroys the sword with one. It reaches out and just breaks the blade and shatters the blade, and I am now, you know, down on the ground with both arms broken. Whatever. He could have saved his life by declaring, right? The players were free to sunder or something, etc. Or I could have said the creature shatters the sword. But this was the creature wasn't there to just get its blade back. It's a vampire. It hunts. It's what it does. And so this was an epic battle. And if they had narrated, if Savric had narrated that he was trying to survive this battle, I would have treated it differently. Savric was engaging this monster, and so it's going to end the way it ends. And the vampire is an incredibly deadly creature, which is why it is where it's at on the list. So anyway, it was a great session. And Faustus, we go back to Faustus. He brings the kids in. He sees that Connor is battered and beaten and bloodied and harried, and he's taken an actual artifact from around the neck of the witch. So he's carrying a bone, looks like a child's femur or something that's got carvings in it. And he's taken that from the woman. He's hidden it in his robes. He sees the condition Connor's in. He watches his two sisters embrace him as they walk back to the manor. He sees the girls that he recognizes from the way the girls again treat. He recognized from the way the girls treat Connor that he saved their life, and they're completely grateful for what he must have endured so the girls could run away. You can imagine he's beaten. He's the one's beaten and battered, and he's alive, but he's in a bad way. So you can kind of put together in your head, he must have stepped in between the witch and the girls, who knows what. And they escaped, and he eventually escaped as well when the soldiers were fighting the witch. Who knows? We don't know, but you can imagine, right? Anyway, and that's when Wesweld is there and talks to him and says, "Come to me. Let's go have refreshments and let's talk." It's about midday. So again, their day started same time Faustus's did, but Faustus started the session before them, or actually, no, I think they started the session first. No, Faustus started first. So Faustus read his missive and the calling to come and stay with me in the evening, and then we cut to Savric and her, and that would have been like the same day, but at the beginning of the day, right? Or midday or late day, doesn't matter, especially since we had the luck check to see what time of day it was, and it was closing into darkness. So it could have been late evening for both of them. It just wasn't yet dark, right? And this is fall, so it would have been closer to afternoon for darkness to fall. So again, completely flexible. You are juggling lots of variables, but again, it's narrative, it's open. for context. And so I've said, I would say to those who want to present this, don't worry about everything being perfect, right? You can bend and fold the fabric of the situation for your descriptive narrative play. Okay, so they have a great conversation about the witch. He learns that Wesweld is grown up. All Grown Up is the title of the session up here. I titled it All Grown Up because Wesweld is now doing his father's job as the lord of the country, of the lord of the county. And he's finding out what it's like to have all of the responsibilities. So he's all grown up, and we have a great there's some talk about the witch, and they haven't even gotten around to Wesweld's real dilemma in this conversation, which is that there's an emissary here from Northwich King with a proposal for me. And we hadn't even gotten into why Wesweld called him here, right? He called him here to come stay for a few days and meet the emissary. He did not disclose in his missive, what's troubling him. And to be honest, we don't know. Does he want to marry this girl? Does he not? Whatever, right? Is his trouble something else? Is the emissary something else? Whatever, we don't know. I rolled vampire, and it crossed my mind to make the emissary the vampire, right? So when I cut back to Faustus, I know now, again, I'm naive. I just know the emissary's there for a reason. I cut back to Faustus, I could have made the emissary a vampire. That's the difference, right? So because Dell took the blade and I made that roll after they concluded the discovery or seed, I went, oh, the vampire is coming for his blade. This was his altar. This had some relevance to its past. The luck of the draw, the vampire became, right? I could have made the emissary a vampire in the court of the king. It could have been a much more intrigue and less violent conflict, right? But it happened to be I rolled that vampire when when we went back to Saverick and the girl, Yrsa, and here we go, right? That's just how the luck of the draw went with the contextualization. And because they're separate, this is different. If they were a party together, of course the vampire would be involved in wherever they're at, whatever they're doing. So if they were all together in the court, the vampire would have probably been this emissary or some other story of a vampire, right? Or who knows? But again, we have split parties, right? Very often there are characters all over the map, all doing different things, and never the twain shall meet, right? So there you have it. That was last night's session. It ends with my final roll, which was unnatural fog or fog. I just put fog. And again, I only use one word, but it's 11, which means it's just going to affect the difficulty of the game. It's not 18, which might bring with it, like the movie The Fog, monsters, right? So if I had fog on here, 18, and unnatural fog, it'd be global, and with it, some kind of monsters that hides in the fog. This was 11. This is just an epic unnatural. This is going to be a fog that's unnatural, but it would affect play. If they were in combat, it would affect combat. If they were traveling, it would affect their ability to travel without being lost. Simple. So again, if I know fog is on 10 or 11, it's going to affect play, but it's not going to bring with it a monster. If it's 17, it might bring with it a monster. If it's 16, it might bring with it some other thing. But there you have it. And that's how the RSC works. You weight it. Fog could be an 18, fog could be an 11. The fog it'll have different meaning depending on where fog's at. So, all right, everybody, I hope you're having the games you want to have. I hope you're playing with the people you enjoy playing with. And more power to you. All right, bye-bye.